Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is David Yeghiaian. I am the Chief Strategy Officer at KerberRose, and our topic today is re-energizing your business, surviving and thriving in the new normal. My contact information is here. You'll see it also at the end. And while I'm the presenter today, there is obviously a team of people here at KerberRose that can and will help out on a variety of topics we'll be discussing today. We have individuals and a team here who does HR and leadership consulting, financial performance, business valuations, succession planning, strategic planning. We also have teams who do wealth management and technology, which will relate to the topics that we are discussing today. So while you might just get me today, there is certainly a large team here at KerberRose who can help on all of the topics that we will be addressing. So some of our key learning objectives, and before I get into this also, if you have any questions throughout this, feel free to type them right into the chat, and when they pop up, I will certainly address them. If I miss them, I'll address them later at the end of the presentation, but feel free to type in any questions as they come up during today's session. So our learning objectives today, or think of them as your takeaways, are, there's 4 key items here. Identify the methods to improve planning and health across your business. So health is certainly kind of an odd topic when you think about your business. And so I want to discuss that, and we will be discussing it because we're going to talk about health in terms of 4 key areas: your employees, your clients, your processes, and your financial information. So, and just to explain that a little bit more, if you think of health, let's think of our individual health. I'm a pretty healthy person. I exercise for an hour every day. However, if somebody asked me to run a marathon, I would not be able to do it because I don't train for marathons. I train for certain other things. So that's why the health is important in your business, because you might be healthy in one area and you may be a little unhealthy in another area, which is where your business might be thriving today and or maybe struggling to survive in another area. So that's going to be a key topic point for us. What questions to ask? So there's going to be a lot of questions throughout this session that you should be asking yourself. You should be asking the leaders in your organization. You should be asking your leadership team. You should be asking any group of advisors, your clients. So we're going to talk a lot about those and other traps that we fall into often as business owners, as people who run business, as employees in businesses. And then we're definitely going to spend a lot of time on these 4 areas to prioritize where you really can thrive to create more value for your business overall. So what are some current business challenges? Obviously, we've had COVID-19, so we certainly have had a major business challenge over the last 4 or 5 months. Several items from that relate to these business challenges, and or even if we didn't have COVID-19, we certainly have similar challenges to what is on the screen here. So the first bullet relates to employee challenges and culture. How is our culture? How is the morale in our organization? If morale isn't good, it is difficult for our employees to work harder and serve our clients. Do your employees have fears of layoffs, of job loss? Pretty common today, and many of them might be leaving, or if they do leave or you've had to downsize, they were good employees. How do you get them back? That's a common theme I hear today in business of how do we hire, where do we find good employees, frankly? So that certainly is a huge business challenge. Second one relates a lot to clients. Replacing revenue you might have lost over the last 4 or 5 months, finding new revenue sources, items such as that. So again, key item there. The third item, reinventing your business and creating more efficiencies. This will relate to processes that we'll be discussing. Notice I'm trying to avoid using the word pivot. I'm kind of sick and tired of seeing the word pivot your business. So instead, let's use reinvent your business on this one. The fourth item is prioritizing short-term while maintaining a long-term focus. This is very common regardless of COVID, where businesses just get so focused on the day-to-day operations, the day-to-day struggles, they become very reactive, and we don't focus on the long term. And we need to do both. When we lose sight of the long term, we ultimately lose sight of strategy, and we lose our focus overall. So that's a very important item. And then ultimately, one I've been hearing a lot of, believe it or not, in the last few months from business owners is as things started to open up, places are actually very busy and they're catching up on some things, but they're struggling because they may not have the right employees because they had to downsize before, and they're having a hard time finding new and good employees, or they're just having a hard time overall serving customers. And if that continues, they're going to revert back to that second bullet, which is they're going to ultimately lose those customers and they need to find more revenue sources. So all of these, that last one is a good business challenge because revenue is coming in, but organizations are struggling on how to handle that. So when we look at those business challenges, we ultimately need to balance the long-term versus the short-term. And again, most of us are always focused on the short-term because we have to do certain things today. However, I want to pose some core questions here of, does your organization have a strategic plan? Most organizations do not. Those that do, I would question if anybody knows where they are, because typically you've created a plan and it goes in a drawer somewhere, which means it's not being used. Or I've seen organizations that say, I have a strategic plan, and they hand me a 70-page document, which is an operational plan, or they hand me a half-page document, which doesn't have any detail of a strategic plan. So your plan should be, it's not necessarily that it should have a set number of pages, but it should be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based, SMART format. It should be pretty specific and have goals, strategies, and action items, champions in terms of who's doing what and by when, all key items in your plan. And why it's important is organizations and businesses that don't have a plan, it's like throwing darts blindfolded. I used to play darts a lot when I was younger, when I had more hair and it was less gray than it is today. And I was fairly decent, but I couldn't imagine playing darts blindfolded. And that's what happens when organizations don't have a good action plan with goals, strategies, action items, and champions, and holding people accountable. Because when things like COVID hit or any major item in your business, the plan is really that guide to pull you back and say, how do we align ourselves back for what we're here to do? Another key item in a strategic plan where I see a lot of organizations struggle is they put too many things in it, or then they have a great plan that they're working on, and other things come up in the year that just get added and nothing ever gets removed. So a simple step in a strategic plan is, if something ever gets added and reprioritized, that's okay. Something needs to be moved to next year or later in the year. That's okay when that happens, because again, what happens is too many organizations continue to take on new things and then nothing gets done well. So very important in terms of that general rule there. So I want to talk about 6 questions that do relate to health of an organization. And these are really easy, simple questions and a really simple exercise for any organization to go through and ask yourselves. And I want to explain an example of how we did this here at KerberRose. Now you'll notice here is these aren't my questions. These aren't KerberRose's. They actually came from Patrick Lencioni. And for those who may not be familiar with him, he's an author, he's a speaker. He owns his own consulting business. He's written a ton of great books. Search him on Amazon. All of his books are good. Frankly, he writes them in story format, so they're very easy to understand. They're quick reads, and they always have a great message. So want to give him credit for these 6 questions here. So I want to start with number 1, 2, and 3. So these questions, ultimately, the answers to these questions should really not change year to year in your business. And I want to give you examples of that. So KerberRose went through this process during the middle of COVID because we have a strategic plan, but we took a step back to say, let's re-ask ourselves these questions to gauge how healthy are we, and do we need to modify anything in our own plan? So the first one we asked ourselves was, why do we exist? And it was great because we were able to answer that quickly, and that related to our mission statement. Our mission statement relates to helping our clients and our employees be successful. And that's a pretty broad statement. But when we talk through that of ultimately everything we're doing should be relating to helping our clients and our employees be successful. So we were able to, again, in number 1 through 3, the answers should remain consistent. So it was a good gauge for us to make sure we were still we had the right question and we had the right answer to this question. The second one, how do we behave? This was a really interesting one when we talked to a lot of organizations over the last 4 or 5 months, because behavior certainly changed. When people get scared and people have fear, things change. For us, when we asked ourselves that question, our answer related to our values. So the answer to this one typically relates if your organization has a set of beliefs and values, or even if you're doing this for yourself ever, this is a good exercise, frankly, to do for yourself. How do we behave should relate to your own personal beliefs and values. So again, in our instance, we looked back and we have a set of values. They're honesty, integrity, respect, having a balanced life, and being community oriented. And during the time of when COVID, again, it hasn't gone away, obviously, but when we were in the middle of COVID, we really looked at a couple of those values strongly, which was community oriented and balanced life, and respect, frankly, of how are we going to work remotely with our employees? What are we going to do to help our communities out? A lot of those aspects, but it kind of regrounded us after we found out and reconfirmed why do we exist. It was ultimately making sure are we behaving in the way we're supposed to behave. So again, that answer should not change too often. The third question is, what do we do? And that sounds like a really odd question because hopefully your business knows what to do. However, again, here's where some organizations did change, certainly, a few months ago. So how you define this is going to vary. And I'll give you an example. Again, for KerberRose, we went back to what do we do? What do we do is we're trusted business advisors. And during the middle of COVID, when the payroll protection plan was certainly going on, we were doing that of contacting clients and they were contacting us to help them through PPP. That was exactly what we needed to do during that time. I'll give you another example of there were a lot of organizations who are manufacturing organizations who were manufacturing product A, but when they asked themselves this question over the last 4 or 5 months, several of them stopped producing product A and they started producing PPP equipment or something else because there was a need in the market, in the country, in the world. And so their definition was the same. They were still manufacturing something. They just changed what it was, but what they do was still the same exact thing. So again, those 3 questions, certainly the answer shouldn't change all too often, but they help give you a start to a guide on how healthy are you as an organization, because that'll help determine, are you surviving or are you thriving? Questions 4, 5, and 6 may or should really be considered and changed often, especially during COVID-19, but certainly any time of years, these should certainly be asked. All of these 6 should be asked annually, but these questions 4, 5, and 6, the answers may change slightly here. So again, when we asked ourselves, how will we succeed? Okay, there's simple answers to that. Hey, we're going to make money. Okay, that's not how we define that. When we looked at how are we going to succeed, we went back to our strategic plan, which outlined clearly goals, strategies, champions, action items, dates, and it regrounded us in, again, some of these dates may change because we've had to shift based on COVID-19. However, we're still going to succeed by doing these initial things that we decided to do that we deemed important for us in the long term as an organization. That's also where that strategic plan is important. So how will you succeed helps a lot of that. What is most important to us right now? And I should have underlined the right now because, again, question 5 absolutely can change month to month. For some of us, it might change even day to day. So for us, when we asked that question a few months ago, it was helping our clients through payroll protection plan, through PPP. That was it. We defined that a little bit differently because in our instance, tax season was extended from April 15th to July 15th. So it was, what are we going to do with our employees to be productive between another 3-month period? So that question is a key one to be really thinking about. Again, you might be asking yourself monthly or quarterly and certainly annually on that one. And as you can see, that answer certainly can change, but it regrounds you in terms of if you, based on the answer to number 4, if you have a good strategic plan in place, number 5 might be, what's the one thing in that strategic plan that you really should be focused on right now? Question 6 is, who must do what? Again, I referred to this a little bit earlier in the strategic plan of who's really responsible for it. Because sometimes everybody looks around or everybody thinks somebody else is going to do it and then nothing gets done and nobody does it. So who must do what? And I should put by when is very important in question 6. So these 6 questions are just a great frame to really determine your health of an organization fairly quickly. Again, good to do it for yourself, but certainly for your organization, there should be a team involved in this to be able to have a certain set of ideas bouncing around with each other. So I want to get into the focus of our 4 priority areas. And the first one is employees. I hope we can all agree that nothing really gets done without employees. Now, some of us might say, well, employees are kind of a pain and there's a lot that doesn't get done because of them. However, we need employees to produce our product, serve our clients, to do whatever it is we do as a business. So employees is very important. This prioritization area relates to your culture. It relates to your beliefs and values. Are you able to attract good people? Are you able to hire good people? Are you able to retain good people? Rehiring is expensive. So getting them in is very important. While you have them, are you teaching them? Are they learning? Especially if your business happen to be slower, what are you doing to keep these people busy, especially if they're good and top performers, and keeping them engaged? Again, relates to culture. Do you have a good culture as well to keep them engaged? And then what is being done to develop these people and produce more effective leaders? This is a very, very difficult one for a lot of organizations, because how are we really developing our people into leaders? This relates to succession planning of who's going to take over my business one day. This relates to one that we hear often of, I never have time to take a vacation because nobody knows what I do. Well, if we've trained our people well and we've delegated well and they're good leaders, you should be able to go on vacation, and it should be more than a day or two. It could be weeks, because you have a good team in place to run your business. Very important in terms of that. And then the last item on here is, again, this relates to just having a good culture, but it does help your employees of, is everybody willing to give a little for the benefit of others? So again, several months ago when businesses were really suffering, and certainly a lot still are today, what you saw in a lot of instances where employees lost their jobs, employees were furloughed, but some top leaders kept their jobs. That is not everybody giving a little. That's a few doing a lot for others. The other aspect of this, in terms of this particular item that we saw in the more positive, strong organizations, was leadership was willing to give up a larger percent of their compensation to ultimately save other people's jobs where that occurred. That goes a long way for your culture. That goes a long way with your employees. Relates to one of those earlier items that we talked about, is then you didn't also lose those employees, and they become ultimately more loyal to your organization. Ultimately, in this whole one, a leader is only as good as his or her team. So there's a lot packaged in here that if we ultimately are doing a good job of taking our employees, things should be stronger and help out long-term in your organization, versus if we don't do that, you're again probably surviving versus thriving. Customers. This is one that most people typically start with, or financials that you'll see coming up. However, again, let's go back to ultimately employees are who serve our customers. Employees are who produce our services. Employees are who help us generate financials thanks to our customers. So while all of these are related, customers might be second to employees. We ultimately have to get customers. That's a good thing. We need them to get paid. We need them to produce revenue. So huge concerns for us are, where am I going to get these new customers? How am I going to get paid by them? Especially now, if some of your clients are struggling, you'll be delaying payments, or you might be going to collections in some instances. So that's really important. How are your relationships with these clients? Being proactive with them. This, again, was a common one we heard over the last several months when a lot of businesses were slower, and we would say, well, what are you doing with your clients? And they would say, well, nothing, because business is slow. And we would simply say, well, if business is slow, this is a great time to be proactively contacting your clients, not to sell them more if you know they're struggling, but to solidify your relationship with them. And you can see here is, I have down personal. It's amazing how much occurs with our clients that, I saw a lot over the last 4 months of simply checking in and saying, how you doing? How's your family doing? That just builds a whole personal bond and makes that client relationship even stronger. Is there anything I can do to help? Again, asking them just questions, but it doesn't always mean you're making a hard sell. As you'll notice on the last bullet here, don't pounce, which I'll come back and cover. But it's just building a good relationship. So when all businesses continue to turn around, that just builds your business, it builds your relationship, and it creates more loyalty overall. The next one there is helping your customers, maybe offering a reduced cost to strengthen the relationship. This one used sparingly. I'm not a fan of just lowering costs for the sake of business. That devalues your own services, it devalues your own products. However, using this selectively can strengthen a relationship. So I'll give you an example. A colleague of mine is in a business that, again, business was slow over the last 4 or 5 months. This colleague continually was contacting other organizations to say, hey, if you have something for us to review, we're happy to provide a free analysis of it. And never charged, never asked for business, never did any of that. And ultimately, business might be starting to trickle in, or certainly it's laying the groundwork for strengthening those relationships when those organizations might be looking to make a change in who they were dealing with or things like that. Again, I'll give you an example of, I was talking to one organization and they said, oh, hey, this person is great. They keep helping us out with these free analysis. And I said, does your current vendor do that? And they said, no. And I simply just said, well, if your current vendor isn't offering that, and this other one who you don't even know is, maybe you should consider inviting this other person in to maybe starting to do business with them. So those are things that just are a good business aspect with your clients. Continuing marketing and social media. Again, a common one and a common mistake I see happen is business is struggling, so I'm going to cut marketing. Bad idea. You might lessen your dollar spend on marketing, but you shouldn't cut marketing. And social media, there's a lot of social media that you can do for free with LinkedIn, Facebook, things like that, webinars such as this. So continue to do certain things to be able to do marketing. And the don't pounce, again, is very important. I explained some examples earlier where it's about building the relationship versus being able to go out there and be pushing your clients for a sale because you're struggling. That doesn't go well. So again, it's about the relationship in terms of that. I had a friend who's in the insurance business, and insurance is not one of those things that people quickly change vendors, or certainly is high on people's lists over the last several months if they're struggling. And the discussion we had was, why don't you call some of these individuals up, these clients or your prospects, and simply say, you understand they may not want to make a change, but you just want to sit down with them because they might want to save some money somewhere in the future, and it might be worth you looking through insurance because of that. And this individual is able to get some meetings in terms of that approach because he wasn't pouncing. He was, again, trying to show a different way to add value. So very different aspect and way of looking at things that can help thrive versus survive in a business. Processes. This is one that a lot of organizations or people, frankly, don't like to discuss. It's not the most fun and exciting topic. However, ultimately, are your key processes documented? And when I say documented, we don't need to all be Six Sigma lean companies here. We just need to have fairly good documentation so that when people change or people learn, they can see a process written out and documented and be able to figure out what to do. Are they repeatable? The repeatable piece is a huge key because for organizations that actually are ever looking to sell their business, repeatability is a key thing if I'm ever looking to buy a business, because that means I can repeat something quickly and easily, and it makes your business more valuable. That's why both of these are important, because it ultimately increases the value of your business. It makes it easier to train people. It makes it easier to retain people. What processes can become electronic? That increases speed and efficiency. This, again, is one that scares a lot of people and employees because some think electronic means I'm going to lose my job. I want to give you a great example that, frankly, we just had with an employee here. So this employee proactively looked at doing something electronic. She did the analysis, she sent it in, and her analysis literally said, here's how much this will cost KerberRose per month. Here's how much time it will take to do this electronically. Here's how much time it takes me to do it now. Here's how much my hourly rate is plus my benefits. Here's how much time that KerberRose will save, and that equates to X amount of dollars. It was fantastic. And then she even added, and with the extra time that I will have, here are the things that I can work on that I think are more valuable to the firm instead of doing this. So it was the perfect way for us to look at making a process electronic while saving dollars, while saving time, while also leveraging this person's time in other ways that are even more valuable. And that also, if we go back to our first prioritization area, that's a great employee as well in terms of that. And how's your IT, your technology? Technology is a process. Certainly, again, we've all went through that a lot more with remote work, with webinars, with Zoom, whatever process we use for virtual meetings. And we heard a lot of horror stories over the last 4 months. We heard a lot of success stories. So how are you doing in terms of, is your speed good? Do you have the right equipment? How's your security and your backup systems? Frankly, again, that's one, it's kind of like insurance of, we never want to think about security and backups until something goes wrong or we get hacked. Those are things definitely be proactive with your process to look into that can help you survive and thrive versus survive. And the fourth area is financials. And notice this one is fourth. And this is fourth for a reason, because ultimately, to be able to thrive, organizations that thrive do the first three things very well. They have strategic plans. They're good strategic plans. They have good plans in place for their employees. They have good relationships with their clients that are proactive and more relationships and trusting and advisory versus transactional. And they have good processes that are repeatable and easy to understand. And if an organization does those things all well, the financials will come. It literally happens in 25 years that I've been doing this. It always occurs. It's kind of like a math problem. And A plus B plus C equals D in this instance. So another way to look at this one is, are there some expenses that can be cut or reduced versus people? Again, typically a common thing is we look at always cutting people when things aren't going well, or marketing. And you might just look at, again, if you have better processes in place, that can create more efficiencies and reduce costs to be able to help your bottom line. If you're doing those right things with clients, that will help your top line out. So a lot of different things here to help this financial area. Resetting your financial goals and budgets. Another one that we saw a lot over the last several months as businesses were kind of suffering was things got, businesses came back. However, everybody was like, oh, we got to catch up to our financial goals for the year and hit our budgets. It's probably just not realistic. And it was putting so much undue pressure on the employees, the staffs, the customers, everybody. Again, those other three prioritization areas that we talked about. So be realistic and reset your financial goals and your budgets, and stay positive. Again, the world is suffering. We have a pandemic, obviously. However, there are a lot of good lessons learned over the last 4 or 5 months that we can do to help ourselves, help our businesses, help our employees, help our clients, and ultimately help our financials to be able to thrive again versus just trying to survive. So I want to go back. We covered a lot in those 4 prioritization areas, and just do another kind of alignment in terms of each of those 4 with just not only services, but areas for you as an owner in your business, or to have a discussion with the leaders in your business to look at. Employees, as we mentioned, here, having a good strategic plan, having good HR and leadership development, having a good succession plan, all relate to creating and strengthening that first priority of employees. Customers, again, helping customers. If you have a good strategic plan, if you've tiered your customers, meaning you know who your top A, your top B, your top C customers are. Typically, we don't know that because we haven't tiered them. Spend time with your best customers. That's the best thing to do. So that relates to some of that. Other marketing assistance. Again, a lot of organizations struggle with marketing. It's not their area of expertise. Work with somebody who knows social media, who can create good ads and good marketing messages. And voice of the customer. I haven't mentioned this. I mentioned it a little bit, didn't use this term. So this is a process that typically you should work with a third party on, where you go out to your top 10, 15 customers and have that third party literally ask them a bunch of questions And you would be amazed how much information you can gather, not because you may not know it yourself. However, a client and a customer sometimes just tells an independent person a lot of different information. So this is a process that we have done with multiple organizations over the years. And again, what happens from this is you come back with some key themes on areas to improve your client relationships and your business, because it could relate to employees, it could relate to processes, could relate to financials, could relate to your services or products that ultimately will not only grow the relationship with that customer, it will bring in more revenue overall and help you with other customers. Processes, again, just taking a look at your processes overall, really digging deep into your IT, your technology, your cybersecurity, your backup plans, things like that are very important. And then your financials, tons of areas here, just accounting, payroll, tax planning is a huge one. Excuse me. Looking at value creation planning, this is literally a little different than your strategic plan, meaning value creation is what are the areas within your strategic plan that you can really create more value for. I've mentioned a lot of them so far during this session, and they're key also. Succession planning, how are we setting up our business to create value if I ever do want to sell it to someone else, to my employees, to my children, whomever. Audits, and then certainly wealth management, retirement plans. Do you have a good 401k in place? What are you doing if you're a business owner with your own wealth management, wealth preservation, things like that? So in summary, we've talked about a lot. First item here is, again, let's all understand that surviving and thriving it's not easy. I should have used it, may not be easy. It really is not easy. It takes a lot of work, as we've all talked about today, but it certainly can be done. It can be done, again, with a good strategic plan that is actionable, good employees, great relationships with your customers, some process improvements, and then ultimately, again, the financials will come. And it takes some patience, certainly. There are always ups and downs with it, but if you stay the course and you really stick through that, go back to those 6 questions of financial health, that really helps lay some good groundwork. Remain focused and positive, both short-term and long-term. Again, you need to keep your eye on the short-term, but don't take your eye off the long-term. It's a blend between the two. And if you or somebody you work with is good at one and not the other, find somebody else who's good at the other. There are a lot of people who are really good strategic visionary thinkers, but they are not good at the day-to-day. There are a lot of people that are great at the day-to-day and don't think about the long-term strategy or vision. So you need a couple people, and that's okay, because let's leverage each other's strengths and skills. Focus on being proactive overall and strengthening and developing those customer relationships. Use that voice of the customer process. Proactively call your clients. Again, tier A clients, let's focus on those if you've gone through a client filtering process, and ask them personal information. How are they doing? How are things going? It will strengthen the relationship long term. And then remember the 4 prioritization areas of, again, employees, of customers, of processes, and of financials. You can certainly, as we go through this, and I'm going to open it up for questions here that you can type in. Any of you, and my contact information is here. You can email me for a free organizational assessment. And what that means is I'd be happy to come to your place, have a video, have a phone call, ask you some of those questions, and then certainly give you an assessment on here's some areas that will help you thrive even more, or if you're in a survival mode, help you get out of survival to be able to begin to grow and thrive as well. Again, my contact information is here as well. And with that, I will take a little break and open it up for any questions that you might want to type in the chat. Not seeing any questions. So again, want to be respectful also of everyone's time this afternoon. Again, my contact information is here. If you have any follow-up questions, you can certainly email me. This webinar will also be posted with the audio with it, so you can access it at a later point in time or access it for others in your organization as well. Again, if there's no other questions, which we don't see, I will thank you all for attending this afternoon and participating. And I wish you all the best of luck and thriving in the new normal. Have a great day.